we're going to go be a remote participant. Janice, are you starting this up soon?
It says it's live, but I don't see it on YouTube.
Now you're live. I just see it now.
That's been a repetitive problem, as you know.
And just make sure. Are you, okay.
Can I make a comment here? All this, on my home screen, everything is the same size. It'd be better to have the conference room is the full size and not see all of us equally, I believe.
But you're going to have to change it to speaker view.
Yeah, that's a setting on your.
It's on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I'll share my screen.
Okay, got it.
I have to think about that for a second. I do need to share my screen in order for this to be.
All right. Well, do you want me to kind of do the introduction and we can get started?
I think so, right? Yeah.
You're all set?
All right. So thank you, everyone, for attending the first public meeting that we have to discuss Camden's development of a parking management strategy. So to give you a little background on this project, in June of 2021, we engaged John Burke, who is a parking and transportation consultant. And John will talk a little bit more about some of the work that he's done and the work that he's doing in a few minutes. We engaged John to conduct a downtown parking study to assist the town in our efforts to optimize and better balance the use of our downtown parking supply. So this study is really contributing to the implementation of Camden's 2012 Downtown Master Plan, which recommended the development of an integrated parking management strategy for our downtown area. So we're very pleased to have John with us, helping us out with this project. He has a lot of experience working in communities that are similar to Camden and face similar challenges in regards to optimizing the use of their parking. So I'm going to turn it over to John, and he will conduct the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Audra. Thank you all for attending. I appreciate your coming here today, and those of you at home. As Audra said, my name is John Burke. I'm a professional engineer registered in the state of Maine, a certified administrator of public parking for the University of Virginia, and a consultant, parking and transit consultant here in New England. Next slide, please. So I have a little bit about myself, my qualifications, 30 years experience in parking and transportation industry. Former city parking and transportation director for 3 communities in the 90s in Lewiston, Auburn as their metropolitan planning organization director, and then Portsmouth, New Hampshire, as well as Evanston, Illinois, home of Northwestern University. The last 12 years I've been an independent consultant practicing parking transit downtown development in New England. I've worked in all of the New England states at this point. Listed some of my coastal New England clients from as far south as Mystic, Connecticut, as far north as Bar Harbor, Maine. Next slide, please. So the scope of service, contract scope of service, we'll go through briefly. We always want to confirm the study area that we're going to be focusing on. We'll talk about that. Reviewing existing plans, whether they're master plans, development plans, studies, data, traffic, parking data, making sure that we understand the past, present, and future of parking here. Then we went out and we conducted key stakeholder interviews. So to inform an advisory committee that we have, we wanted to go out, take the extra step of getting stakeholders in the communities, whether those are, employees, residents, downtown residents, landowners, building owners, parking lot owners, and others we will talk about to inform and provide additional input to our advisory committee in developing a set of guiding parking principles, which is the 4th task. And we're, in fact, going to use the input received today to go back and feedback loop again to the advisory committee, who will continue to refine these principles. And the principles really do lead us through the study, not only in helping identify issues and problems and opportunities, but also in evaluating potential improvements as we go forward. So we'll use those throughout the study. We've already started on task 5, conducting a parking inventory, and we've done occupancy counts, which I'll speak to, and ongoing turnover surveys, which I'll speak to. And here we are in task 6. Now, it seems like we're halfway through the study, but we're not, because all these interrelated tasks feed back to one another. We're at the public informational meeting, really having done some of the things we've talked about, but drawn no conclusions. We haven't gotten to problem identification or any of that aspect of it. We're really still in the data gathering stage and discussion. So we're really looking for input on direction. Task 7 is a parking efficiencies analysis. 8, we're going to identify key findings, opportunities, and deficiencies. Again, recommended parking improvements. Will come back with another parking informational meeting and issue a final report. Next task, please. So the study area itself, here is a 5-minute walk radius of the downtown. It equates to about a quarter of a mile radius around the downtown. And why do we identify that as the starting point for a study area? What we have found in doing hundreds of parking master plans and studies over the years is that more than 90% of your parking session, your trips, end up occurring in this zone for a large town parking program. I just recently completed the work for the city of Worcester. We had a 10-minute zone. Why? Because it's a bigger city and people walk further, quite frankly, with higher pricing. Boston, it might be 15 minutes. So, but this is typical. Now, within that 5-minute zone, that's going to set our data collection, but it doesn't mean we're not looking out of the zone. Right out of the gate, our committee said, hey, we got some issues at Lake Beach. That looks like it's right outside the area. Let's go look at that. Eaton Point, yeah, it's just, there's portions of those parking lots that are just outside of a 5-minute. We need to look at those. And in fact, we do look beyond on all the major collector roads because we want to see where there's parking generators and also where there's potential peripheral or remote parking supply. So we just may not count every street as we get out into those areas. All right. Our study advisory committee, made up of what you would think we would have, which is first of all, the town officials that we really need to have in there, the folks that deal with it day in and day out. Okay, the police chief, parking enforcement, certainly public works and planning, very, very important as you move forward with a program. And we want business interests, certainly Chamber of Commerce, economic development, owners, business, and all the input we're going to talk to. Next slide, please. Our stakeholder input, we want to broaden that perspective. And the first thing we wanted to make sure is everybody's a user. All of these folks are users of the parking system. And they come at this with very different perspectives, typically with a downtown resident versus an employee versus a business versus a developer versus someone who's, as we see here on the Pathways Committee, former elected officials. So we're getting as you can see, trying to get a broader view, and even broader we'll get hopefully today. Next, please. So, when we do these interviews, typically there's an hour-long interviews, and they involve a survey as well. The hour-long interview just speaks to what do you see as opportunities, problems, issues, things that feed into that. We get very specific about, and even ask, what do you see as solutions? We also took information from the advisory committee's first meeting and went to them and said, hey, here's some things that we think might be contributing. What do you think about that? And oh, by the way, can you rank, and we're going to survey you and rank those and rate those. So I look for common threads, and oftentimes with stakeholders we don't get that because sometimes a developer and a resident don't necessarily see parking the same way, and sometimes they're in conflict. What I like about our stakeholder interviews here is we saw a lot of common threads. There were common themes that went amongst them. So the first one, that's okay. And these are comments directly from a stakeholder, but they represent multiple comments, if you will. So I don't think there's a parking supply problem, but a parking management problem. We heard this over and over again. We heard it at the advisory committee as well, that there's a general feeling that we have enough supply. But maybe we need better management, whether that's informational signage, directing people, getting full efficient use of our system. That was a common theme. The next common thread we heard was many visitors head toward Main Street looking for a front door parking space, and when they don't find one, they backtrack through town searching for an open space, which adds to the traffic. And it was described more specifically, someone who's a first-time visitor drives up Elm Street, they come to the, they want to see the action. They want to get there to the waterfront. They may go up Bayview, they may go down Main Street, they may get to the public landing, find it's only 2-hour parking, and that's not enough. Ultimately, some of them end up down Main Street, up Atlantic, off down C Street, and then they're finding themselves backtracking through High Street and getting into that long queue, and as we all know. So, one of the things, why is this important? Traffic is interrelated with parking. We can't separate them. And there's a huge opportunity, because we know doing these studies day in, day out, up to 30% of your traffic downtown is people looking for parking. And a lot of studies to back that up. And you see it here. That backtracking and sourcing is creating more traffic. And so there's a great opportunity to maybe have a parking fix that also has a side benefit of improving traffic. That came up over and over again. Third was turnover of parking spaces in the 2-hour zone is poor. Many employees shuffle their cars every 2 hours to avoid getting a ticket. There was recognition that enforcement is there. They are visible. And nonetheless, some of the parking, remote parking, some of the all-day parking is a distance from some of the employers, and therefore there is this shuffle, which is very common in free parking communities. So, but we got this theme as well. The last one that I just kind of want to share on threads, and there were many more, but this fourth one is tour buses, RVs, and delivery trucks take prime parking spaces and can really mess up traffic downtown. The recognition here is all downtowns deal with this. It's a quick problem in many cases. I was coming down Washington Street today, loved to see the FedEx and several delivery trucks under the box truck size that were using the 30 and 20. So they will do what they can do, but when they don't have a space, we're hearing, okay, they'll double park, and potentially, depending on where that happens, that can cause a real mess. So we do want to address this. This is management. This is parking management, and it takes work. It's an operational issue. It's not necessarily I'm going to put out a 100-foot stall and they're all going to go there. It's not going to work that way. So we need to take a more customized approach to this particular problem. Okay. So the next slide, we really talk about key stakeholder input, and this related to the survey that I spoke of. So here, what are the contributing factors to the downtown parking problem? And I've listed here, we had many of these, but I listed the highest 4 ranked and the lowest 4 ranked. And just go through quickly. We kind of covered some of these with the comments. Lack of availability in the 2-hour zone. Okay, can't find a space. And a lot of our downtown is 2-hour parking, including lots. Commercial truck loading, unloading, we mentioned. Too much traffic drawn to the hub waterfront area. Yes, searching for parking, we mentioned. And poor turnover. Lowest rank was the lack of on-street parking supply. And that might seem counterintuitive or in conflict with the top-ranked one. But what was being said here is there isn't a lack of on-street supply, there's a lack of availability. If we were able to get that turnover, if we were able to move employees out, if we were able to use other incentives, perhaps we would have availability. And it was also referenced that we have parking availability on street as you go out these major collector roads. You go out Mountain Street, Mechanic Street. Actually, almost any of these streets, maybe short of Elm Street, you will find parking, all day on-street parking. And some of it's getting used and some of it's not. And of course, we've looked at that in our occupancy count. So, also lowest rank, transit parking shuttle system. Not to say that we wouldn't all love to have a world-class transit system and parking shuttles, but what's being said is they don't feel that's contributory towards a major contributory toward the parking problem. It may have some impact, but compared to everything else, maybe a little less. Same for bicycle and storage. Not to say the town's not working hard with DOT, getting ready to put in more bike racks here on street, but as it relates to the parking problem, maybe a lower contribution. And on-street parking pedestrian conflicts was the lowest in terms of contributory factors. So we brought all of that stakeholder input back to our advisory committee, which is on the next slide, and they started to formulate guiding principles. We stuck on that one.
Not sure.
Okay, that's it.
Years experience in.
So the advisory committee started with a whole host of potential principles that they discussed, and then shortlisted down after hearing that stakeholder input to 15. These will be continued. These will continue to be refined. Language will change. Maybe one will be added. Maybe something will be subtracted. But this is where we're at. So the first, and these are in order. These were ranked and rated and ranked, I should say, by the advisory. So they are in order of priority. First is on-street public parking is a finite, precious commodity, should be preserved, expanded when feasible to facilitate street-level activities in the core commercial area. Okay, a lot of words here. Essentially, we can't make any more on-street parking. It's a finite source. It's a precious commodity. Every town and city is granted so much of it. You can go to one ways and do different things, but essentially what you have is what you're going to have. And we want to preserve, expand. We don't want to do so at the expense of a pedestrian environment. Okay, so we don't want to put parking spaces up to crosswalks and things like that. However, what we have, we want to preserve and protect. So that was first and foremost. The second highest rank was commercial core areas should be reserved for short-term customer and visitor parking to the extent possible. Some of these things may seem obvious, but they're not so much when you get into having to weigh different benefits and and make decisions. This particular one says in that zone we're giving priority to the customer, and our policies should follow that. And I think you've done a great job in getting the 2 hour where you need to get it for sure in those zones. The third, you cannot park what you cannot find, wayfinding signage and online info. We have to weigh that against the aesthetics of signage. Someone mentioned Wiscasset, I don't know who it was, but there was some signage that they didn't like. We just have to, is a balance. And you need to provide enough, but you can't have so much where people tone it out. And I think here there was a real want to say, when it's all free, how do we tell people where the long and the short? The fourth item, existing and future parking within the core commercial should be fairly priced, commensurate in land value and location, paid for by users. One thing discussed and came back quite a bit is pricing can change behavior. So can parking tickets. And so a lot of communities will wrestle with, well, how do we want to change behavior on the back of a parking ticket? And how much do we want to change on the back of a reasonable fee? This is being discussed. So this is being offered here as a potential guiding principle. Fifth says, well, if we do have paid parking, we need to make it easy, and it needs to be in multiple payment forms. The whole point here is to make the experience more enjoyable for the visitor, the customer, and everybody who's here, resident, employee, and right down the line. So we need to make this, a priority to make it easy in any case. 6, parking should be considered as a secondary use that supports the primary economic use of land. Nobody's coming here for parking lots. They're coming for other things. So parking lots, as we see them as planners, we always see them as land banks for something better. And hopefully, if they're in the heart of your downtown, hopefully there's a vision to someday be something better. It may be an infill situation, I don't know. There may be sea level climate changes that affect our parking. But over time, there are better things as we make better walking environments downtown than surface lots. 7 is mean what you say. Regulations should not be posted if you're not going to be enforced. Again, another one that's an obvious, but I can tell you most communities where there is free parking, that does not occur. There's a lot of signs that don't get, and of course, the user figures that out in about 5 seconds, and those signs stop losing effect, and you kind of lose control of your system. So that's a good one. We got 15, number 8. Parking regulations should be very consistent and easy to understand. Yep. Number 9, core commercial areas should be accessible to all users, of course. 10, private parking facilities should be viewed as potential public assets. And that was one that was discussed to say you've got a lot of private off-street parking and a lot that's not getting fully used. Is that an opportunity? Of course. It's an opportunity potentially to provide more public space. 11, all public facilities must be safe, appealing, and maintained. Yes. And 12, non-auto transportation strategies are important ways, not just to increase mobility, but reduce parking demand. We're not just talking about building more. It's also about reducing the need, so that's in there. 13, parking discounts, whether monthly or hourly, should be provided to resident users, whether they live downtown, own a business downtown, or work downtown. I feel very strongly, no matter what you do. Those 3 user groups should be protected in some way. Every community does that, by the way. I don't want to say all 3 groups. Every community does at least one, and they do it in different ways. 14, parking is dynamic, so the plan must be also. So once we produce this plan, we want to make sure that we come back a year after implementation and see what worked and what didn't work and refine it. 15, and final, this is the apple pie in motherhood, that, provide world-class customer service for sure, safe, convenient, customer-friendly. You've all heard it's the last experience all of our customers have is the parking, and how we leave them is really, how they think of us sometimes. So those are our guiding principles. The next slide, we're going to get into a little bit of our inventory and occupancy survey. So we're just at the beginning of this, drawn no conclusions, but we have started and done the full inventory
in progress
of the on and the off street, public and private spaces in our study area. So we've inventoried all of the all day, the 2 hour, the 15 motorcycle spaces, all the spaces that we have. And we've counted them as well. We did not include residential driveways, purely residential streets, which are usually on the outside of the 5-minute zone, or lots under 10 parking spaces. Just too many of them. Next. And then we did, may have to select the individual slide, I don't know. I think we go back one maybe. There we go. So we have a total of 1,459 spaces that we counted, 350 on-street and 1,109 off-street. So, 47% of those were public and 53% of those were private. It's a good mix of public and private parking, for sure, that's an advantage. 1,109 of the off-street spaces, 30% were public off-street spaces and 70% private. So your private off-street is controlling your overall off-street parking supply. Okay, and then we did the parking occupancy counts on a busy Thursday, July 29th and Saturday, July 31st between the hours of 9 and 8 p.m. Both days were good weather days. So we had a little unexpected light rain on a Thursday between 5 and 8. So that may have slightly dampened those counts on that Thursday evening. So from a high level here, looking at through the day on Thursday, July 29th, looking at the on and off street parking, you can see overall, even at the peak period, 1 p.m., about 2/3 of your parking is being used, which means a third of your parking is not being used. There's opportunity. Throughout the day, and remembering, this is July and the heat of the summer, just like we heard from the stakeholders. Usually, I can find parking, and it's not much of a problem. This is a point where every one of my clients on the coast has a problem. Every single one of them, bar none. And in many cases, it's much worse than this in terms of the peaks. So we're looking at the absolute peak. If I can go back to that one for just a second. On July 31st, you see overall peak is less, but for both of these, you notice what's in red. Red means capacity. That's a capacity condition. On street, we call that 85% is at capacity. Anything above that is at capacity. So you're at capacity at 1 p.m. on both days on street, and you can see some peak spreading there in the lunch hour on street and Saturday. Other than that, the overall system is not. Now, we're going to get down to the individual street level, and you're going to see throughout the day there are certain streets that are at capacity all day. But this is your overall system, okay? All right, and then looking at downtown parking occupancy rates just at the off-street system. If you remember from the previous slide, not too bad. The off-street looks really good. Well, when you drill in and now you're looking at it from, well, how many of those are public? The public supply is at capacity. Off-street lots, 90% is capacity. On-street's 85. 90% is what we use. So we're both systems, the entire off-street public supply at capacity on those days. Well, good thing it's just the lunch hour in the middle of the summer on a busy weekday or Saturday. But there is an issue for us to look further in at, and it does read to tell you that, one, you've got all of your on-street, all of your public space being used, but look at the off-street private space. Look at the off-street private space compared to public. Significantly underused, significantly. And it shines the light on, we in the public side, we use our parking better in every city, and we share the parking better on the public side than we do on the private side. That's not in every single case. When we have parking entities that are driven by market conditions, they typically will try, when the employee leaves, let's make sure the resident gets in that space. When the resident leaves, let's sure we get the visitor. Before the resident gets, maybe I can get a couple of visitors in that space. They're sharing the parking. We do that on the public side routinely, not so much on that. Now, luckily, you don't have an awful lot of office space downtown. In some of the communities I have that, you have a lot more empty spaces. But we're going to drill into why we have these rates and what can be done about it. So that's really where we are right now. We are at a point where we have a good set of guiding principles. We want to keep refining them. We want input here today, too, to help us continue to do that. So we've got in-person folks here as well as virtual attendees to provide comments. In talking with the town manager, everything is going to be posted online. We'll have a separate portal, if you will, for Camden Parking Study that as we develop these materials, they will go up on the site. People will have an ability to provide written comments on those, and there's an address up there to do that. So I would advise to keep weighing in and keep visiting the sites before the next public informational meeting, because we will be posting advisory committee work as we go. So that's where we are. And I think at this point, maybe best thing to do would be to open it up. And I know we kind of presented a lot of ideas and may feel some of these are redundant with things that you're already thinking about. I'd encourage you to still provide us your comments in terms of what you see as priorities here in Camden for us to address. This is a unique time where we're right at the start of things, and we really want to make sure that we're seeing everything. I've had people say, there's this one parking space downtown, and the car sticks out, and I want to know about those as well. There's no issue too small, and it's not just the big broad one. So with that, I'll be quiet and happy to entertain any questions as well. Thank you.
This is my first exposure to it. It's now I feel 80% engaged, so it's well done. One of the questions one of the answers that you had listed about the core areas in commercial primarily. One of our biggest conflicts, I saw it yesterday here, where we had commercial trucks delivering on Bayview Street, that turns not only parking spaces into a loss, but it also makes it a one-lane road. So that's a traffic issue, not a parking issue, really. But the same thing happens on Main Street. There's no place for an 18-wheeler to park and deliver, or a box truck, but it causes other traffic issues. That was one comment. The other one was, coincidentally, in the July time period, you mentioned 11 to 1 of the peak. That happens to be very coincidental because I live north of the town and come into town that direction. Between 11 and 1:30 to 2-ish is when the traffic's backed up all the way up
Yes.
Route 1 to, probably a half mile.
Yes.
So that makes sense that would be part of that.
Yes, thank you for that. On the peak, I really would consider that these counts were done 11 to 12 leading up to the lunch hour, so I would really say 11 to 2 is seemingly, because somewhere in there, you're very close on your 1 o'clock, your 3 o'clock counts to meeting. It's somewhere in that 2 time frame we fall back under. So that's the peak. But as far as the truck loading goes, and this is really an operational issue. I've seen communities blow out their downtown with trucks, truck stalls, hoping people will use them, and they end up putting them back. It becomes an operational issue, and it's best handled, I think, operationally. And those communities that have community service offices out there, man, they can fix a problem real quick. But
if I can weigh in on Bayview, Bayview also has the issue of multiple sites where there's a lot of work being done, and like workers' truck or pickup trucks being stationed, parked there for the whole day. So that is not something that parking can address, but it's something that the town should keep an eye for, because I understand, and Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, that there should be permits for workers when they work at sites like that to make sure that parking restrictions are being complied with. But it's more of an operational issue than something that the parking study is going to look into.
So is it more the scheduling of loading and unloading?
Yeah.
thank you.
I think this year's been particularly bad because the post office has been working on their project. And I think it's just been particularly bad this year because of that.
I'm just looking through some of the comments that I've gotten from other people when I posted on Facebook that the town is looking at ways to improve parking, and I posted a video called "The High Cost of Free Parking," and it's like a 6-minute video about sort of land use planning and how we reserve so much for parking, which is really sort of what I see as the major issue, is that no, I don't really think we necessarily have a parking problem in Camden. I too, like a lot of these people who are commenting, say, they don't want meters and they don't want paid parking because they've figured out how to navigate it. They can find a parking spot always. I too can find a parking spot, but that the issue is that we're reserving so much of our land for parking, and is that really we have really abundant parking, and really, by many standards, some people are always going to say that there's a lack of parking, but we have abundant parking, but an affordable housing crisis, and so to me that's the bigger opportunity here would be to free up some of these private areas so that people can make better use of their land, or use of their land in a way that is responsive to what the community says are the biggest problems. But I also think that that's sort of the type of thing that's said by somebody that's read a bunch of articles about parking and really started thinking about it a lot. So some of the comments that I got from people here were, I'm not going to read any of their names because they didn't necessarily say to read it on the public record, but I do think it's sort of representative of just like the general, the average resident. Here's one. I really am opposed to metered parking of any kind. Even though it costs us residents to offer free parking everywhere, I still prefer it. Charging for parking not only spoils the small town flavor we all love, it also is annoying, inconvenient, and ugly, and pushes parkers to the residential zones where our space is already limited. I would prefer to pay for a parking enforcement officer to ticket cars that stay beyond the limit or are parked where they shouldn't. Make the tickets steep, and that could act as a deterrent. Here's another one. I have never had a problem with parking in Camden since I got my license in 1984. That includes being an employee of a company based in Camden as a kid, owning 2 businesses that were located in Camden over the years on Mechanic Street, Bayview Street, Mechanic Street, again, and Elm Street, and as a customer of many downtown establishments to this day. Metered parking is a solution to a problem we don't have. Here's another. Every day I go downtown, I see another former parking space gone. A good start and future mantra should be save the spaces that are left. I think the ticketing system for overtime users is fine and for sure punishes abusers for parking beyond 2 hours. Parking meters or paid parking is almost a worse idea than taking out the dam. This isn't Portland. I swear, it's like a contest around here to see who can come up with the most ridiculous ideas possible to torture taxpaying citizens and see which ones we will go along with. And you know that I don't. These are nice people too that also have really good. I do think there's some kind of like, hold on, why are we ruining everything? There really isn't that big of a problem. And so, here's from somebody who's thought a little bit more about like parking and land use. More and more people are walking a half block from the public lots to downtown businesses. So good to see. Directional signage has improved tremendously. There is a bit too much long-term parking for free, despite the 2-hour limit. We should consider those machines that produce paper tickets you put on your windshield or the kind you can refill from your phone. Free parking in peak seasons is too much of a public subsidy. People will come to Camden, park, and stay a day or two on the way to Bar Harbor. People are used to paying in almost every city or small town I know. We should get on board during the June through November season. I've once been told, drive around the public landing 3 times and you'll find a spot. It works most of the time. No meter, please. People, here's a common theme that people stop quickly for bank transactions or ATM, quick stop at French and Braun or Walgreens, pick up pizza, sandwiches, bagels, or coffee, drop off payment at Allen Insurance, get ice cream, etc. These are local businesses that need town support. To penalize people that move around to our parking spot is not worth losing downtown businesses. So, just
Good, thank you.
a little bit more of the. I worry a little bit that sometimes these studies become people that are already really interested in thinking about parking, and that I want to make sure kind of that the result helps to like educate people about sort of the cost of the status quo as well. So
Thank you.
people don't like to show up for this kind of a thing in the middle of the day. So I want to, there are lots of opinions about it. The turnout here doesn't necessarily reflect like the strong feelings about parking in Camden that, just.
Much more participation as we go along in the study.
Right.
It grows exponentially.
To Allison's point, I agree. I wouldn't expect many people to show up in Dallas today, but when more of the word gets out to the businesses and others in town, we'll hear a lot more. I know for a fact that some of the businesses on Main Street almost consider the parking part of their domain. Mm-hmm. Because they, obviously they'd love customers to pull up, pull over and go do their coffee, whatever they do, and drive away. Yeah. Some of them have delivery that they provide. So where does their delivery truck park? It's a little difficult to park on the landing and truck walk stuff down and then deliver it. So those issues will come to light in time as we go downstream.
Absolutely.
I guess one question I had just to follow on was in Wiscasset. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what they did there. MDOT did and the town did. They had diagonal parking for the longest time period, and they consider it a traffic problem because of backing out into traffic. But is that really any different than a person parallel parking in a parallel space on a federal arterial highway like we have on Main Street?
The accident rates tend to be higher. It depends on the widths. So I do angle parking too, and a lot of cities will try to, we don't quite have that width. Let's still try to do the angle. We've done back-end angle. We've done head, which is coming out of UMass Amherst. We do some projects to do back-end angle on very wide streets to see that accident rates were a little bit better. But ultimately, they do come with usually slightly higher accident rates. There's also a concern of bicyclists.
Yes.
That being said, I don't know the situation exactly there. But I think it can be done, certainly. We do angle parking all the time. It just needs to be.
I would think it'd be difficult on Main Street. We're not going to widen it, unfortunately.
Volume, well,
We'd
you
love
mean,
to, but
traffic volume's a big part of that, right?
traffic
It's
volume's
the
huge.
side, yeah.
And
So-
parallel parking is probably one of the things that I think American driving schools don't teach. And it takes on average, it takes a little longer for a person to parallel park. And while they're doing that, people being polite, they're waiting. So it does, but again, that's
Yeah.
a traffic congestion issue, not a parking issue.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if I find it difficult to believe that diagonal parking in Camden could ever be considered because of the width of the road.
Yeah.
There used to be diagonal parking on Main Street, like
Did there?
years and years ago, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, width is the issue.
Yes,
and-
definitely.
And, pedestrian environment, what changes is traffic grows every year, typically, not across the board. The pandemic, sometimes they drop. But typically it goes up if you look at some of the volumes. We had angle parking on all of our streets, probably in the 40s and 50s. I mean, all the main streets were angle, but, over time, proliferation of the single-use car, this kind of stuff.
I'm happy you're bringing this point because I think the parking study is meant to look at what's happening right now in Canada, but also prepare for the future. And the traffic and hopefully, more people visiting our town and staying over on their way to Bar Harbor or wherever they're going is only going to grow. So the reason why we're doing that today is also to make sure that we prepare for the future. So I think there's a big time span that we need to keep in mind. It's not just what happened this summer or the summer before. It's really a prospective work to make sure we prepare for the future and that we can still have a town where everybody can find a parking space when they come, for lunch or whatever. And at the same time, we have a very fair and equitable approach. And I think it's something we have had in every one of the discussions we've had, that the fairness and the equity of accessing parking downtown in a very restricted area we're talking about as well. It's not Camden wide.
And I just wanted the public to be clear from my perspective that no matter what we do with the parking, it's not going to solve the traffic problems.
No, these are two different
Not even
things.
come
It's a very
close.
good point too, yeah.
It could have a very minor, maybe a minor impact, if we could even think about diagonal versus, but I'm not suggesting that either, but the traffic issues we have and the delivery issues we have are operational, as you had suggested.
But I guess to John's earlier point, better management, signage, wayfinding, all of that has the potential to help alleviate some of the traffic if 30% of our volume is people who are circling back and driving around looking for parking spaces.
I see.
Yeah, I mean, and it's true in every single, I listed the communities that I've worked with. They all struggle with the same thing, because they're all waterfront communities. Everyone wants to be there right at the waterfront.
Oh, sure.
Does everyone need to be there at the waterfront in their car versus on their feet? That's where you start to look.
Or on a bike, or on a
Or on a bike.
Or on a bike.
Yeah.
We've been talking about
I
bikes a
know.
lot, so
On a bike
this
and a
is,
bus, yes. That's a very good point. So, but I do think on the issue of, I just wanted to speak to the issue of meters or any other solution. It really is a series of trade-offs. Every community looks at it differently. No matter what's implemented, there are trade-offs to that. And we talked about on the back of a parking ticket, there's trade-offs with issuing the amount of parking tickets you need to issue to get turnover. But maybe you go without paid parking. So there are communities that wrestle with those things. It's more difficult on the seacoast just because the demand is profound. The parking demand is unrelenting and very difficult to chase people all day, but anyway.
I also think, just the amount of time that we spend discussing the way that parking should be enforced and whether the tickets are too high, and is the town ticketing now or not ticketing now, and all the misconceptions about what can be solved by ticketing and fair enforcement and unfair enforcement, and then it's okay, well, let's put it on the agenda for this select board meeting, and then there's a lot of energy that goes into trying to help everybody take turns with the free parking and to decide who should have a parking permit downtown. Should you get free parking if you're a lobsterman, if you're a schooner, all this stuff. There's like a cost to just all of that planning. And sometimes when you have a resource that is desirable, it's a problem that the market can solve. It would be like, and a lot of people say too, they would prefer to be able to pay something to avoid the searching, like that, to be able to park on the public landing all day, for a couple hours, that is worth something, and they'd much rather, divvy it up that way rather than having to spend half an hour driving around.
Or free space.
And for other people, it's like, no, to save that, $5 or $2 or whatever the price point is, it's worth it. Like for me right now, I'm embarrassed to say I was running a little bit late and I was frazzled and I thought I'd probably be able to find a parking spot right here, and I just did it. But as soon as it's a very easy kind of adjustment for like a calculus for me, as soon as I start to calculate that maybe I'm not going to find a parking spot, it's really not much more difficult just to park a little further away. And I think there are a lot of people that can be kind of easily pushed in that category. I would love to be able to have a bench or something to sit and, when you're waiting for something, or I was wondering if you're going to inventory the bike racks at all, because it is very, there's nowhere to put a bike here if you come to a meeting on a bike. The bike rack in the public landing is, sometimes you actually can't get a bike in to the little center area because it's so walled in by cars that the handlebar width for a bike exceeds the amount of space that you have to get in there. So that is that. And then the only other comment I have is the future part of it, I think, is really like essential that we think about. One of the comments that I got on this Facebook post was that pretty soon people are going to be, they're going to be self-driving cars anyway. And, you're just going to be able to say, okay, tell your car to drop you off down here, and then it can go park at the tannery or the mill or wherever the place may be. And so like kind of looking at this as an exciting thing a little bit, like how can we, like you said with the land, use these parking lots as land banks. When the public landing was first developed, there was a donor, Mary Louise Curtis Bach, who did a lot of the work to get that cleaned up. And it was all the initial plans said that the town was supposed to be kind of like half a park and half a parking lot. And the Olmsted brothers drafted up these plans, and the town just kept saying, "Oh no, there needs to be more parking. There needs to be more parking. There needs to be more parking." And we just kind of like whittled away at that by sort of a few people saying. A lot of the time, it's the downtown businesses that have been driving it a little bit, maybe having a little bit more. I think it was put to me that they've had more of a voice in town planning than they should, perhaps. That of course it's going to be convenient to them to have lots and lots of parking down there, but that we should be looking to like the future of how can we use this land better.
Absolutely, I agree. The short term, long term. And I do get into these studies, and people are focusing on the 15-minute space and the 20-minute here, and we will look at those. Is it the right time? That's actually really important that we're getting the times right on the street, the restrictions, but missing the point that this is a moment in time to look 20, 25 years down the road. Don't just because the parking's there, it has to always be there.
Right.
That's where we fall down on the long term. We gotta think beyond what could occur over there. And it's hard to crystal ball everything, but this is a chance to reimagine where your parking is.
Also, I think one of the things we're looking at are a few parking incoherences. So one of the biggest incoherences we have in town is the 2 hours parking spot at the schooner for the day sailors, but usually the whole trip takes a whole 4 hours because you're 2 hours on the water, you have to come in ahead of time, you come back, you may want to walk around the wharf or whatever, or Main Street or Bayview and do a little shopping. So having a 2 hour parking spot for a 4 hour trip doesn't work. So we're really trying to look at those incoherences and resolving them so that it works for the businesses, because one of the big things we want to be able to achieve is to improve the quality of parking for our business owners, not take it away from them, and make it fair, again, make it fair for everyone.
Yeah, yeah, and I just wanted to add, I mean, one of the things that came to mind when you were talking about the long term is just the whole look at 2 hour today, whereas, you know, it has been the mainstay for the last 20 years in downtowns. Before that, it was 1 hour parking. And now folks are saying, do we want to kick our customers out at 2 hours, or should we write them a ticket? I mean, I don't know, they're spending money on. So these are all really good questions. Just because it's always been 2 hours, or every city's 2 hours, do we have to be? I don't know. These are the kind of, yeah, we got to get ourselves out of the minutia of what's there and think about it.
I guess just a detailed question. Statistically, it's probably impossible to figure out how many are employees of businesses downtown that are parking in 2 hour spaces and moving cars. There's no way to quantify that.
Yeah, we're doing license plate surveys, so just spot surveys, so certain streets, certain 2 hour lot, and then just how does that relate to what we see in other coastal communities on New England? Fortunately, I do them all, so I know what their rates are, and I know what we try to achieve for those rates, both in terms of how many tickets are issued, how many folks are not getting ticketed. You know, you only get a very, very small percentage, very small percentage of folks with a ticket who are actually violating that. But that being said, no, we have rates to compare it to, and we'll feed that back. Definitely.
I think Scott has parking enforcement has a good handle on it too. We talked about it yesterday at the work group meeting, and parking enforcement has a good handle on where, you know, people are using those as you know, that parking shuffle while they're working, the employees. He's got a good idea where those are.
When you think about, like, the further you get away from, you have a big employer, the further you get away from the lots, you're going to see more shuffling, right? So you get down Bayview, you know, there's spaces that are going to get shuffled for sure, because it's just a longer walk to all day.
I do think Allison, someone made a comment, and Bob, you talked about it, about stopping for bagels or coffee and being able to get in and out. We did talk about that yesterday, about making sure we're providing, or going to be able to provide, better locations and the right timing, as John said, for those spaces, so businesses our spaces can accommodate those short-term visits, as opposed to taking up a 2 hour spot for, you know, 5 minutes. Yeah.
My only comment was that that's going to be comments from the local businesses, because there are businesses on Main Street that are stopping up.
Yep.
You know, that's just what they are.
And also the curbside, you know, during the pandemic, we've seen a number of businesses that have increased the curbside pickup, and they've tried to save that spot so you can get in, pick up your bag, get out. And curbside is here to stay because it's so popular with customers.
It is.
You know, you call in your order, pick it up. It's really cool. So trying to figure out also how we can, you know, make that possible, so that, again, equity of access and fairness of access.
That's right. And the pandemic has focused the entire parking community on curb use, because we have way more parklets for restaurants. That's you know, in New England, we're getting to the south. That's our number one thing that's happening. We got them coming on, taking the curb space away for outside dining, and the other is you know, the takeout service has become. So there's just been a focus on the curb. There's more people who want to use that curb than there ever is possible space. That includes loading and everything else that goes with it. So, yeah, those are very good points.
Perfect. Great presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
Provided a lot of information, and I'm sure it'll slowly seep into our community, and from this and from articles about it, and the next few should be more interesting.
Absolutely, and I would just caution, it's hard for me, I really try hard, don't jump to solutions. People want to talk about solutions, but we're going to identify, we're going to have findings, we're going to identify the issues, and then we'll look at alternative solutions, and then I think we'll have a real, maybe a deeper conversation on some of those issues. But thank you for all your comments, appreciate it.
And I should add that John's provided us with really fine-grained data on the counts that they've taken, so I'll also post that information on the website so everybody can look at
Is there
it.
a place on the website for this parking?
There is. Yep,
I
there's,
didn't look, that's my
it's
bad.
right on the homepage. It's a news item, so.
Perfect. Thank you, perfect.
All right, thank you very much, thank you all.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Thank you.